The camera pans across a glittering mountain resort, chandeliers glowing against snowy peaks. As a black woman in a sleek suit stands on a balcony, her gaze fierce yet composed. "My husband thought I wasn't good enough for his brother's wedding," she begins, her voice steady but laced with pain. As the CEO of a luxury resort chain, she built an empire in silence, yet endured her husband's dismissals, his family's subtle jabs at her roots, her style, her skin. They excluded her from gatherings, mocked her quietly, and now barred her from a celebration at her own resort. Betrayed but unbroken, she's ready to reclaim her worth. Will she let their rejection define her or rise above it? Hit that subscribe button for our latest stories. Share where you're tuning in from, and stay with us. Her comeback might just shock you. The house glowed softly under the evening light, a suburban haven with manicured lawns and warm windows that promised a sense of stability. Inside, a black woman sat at the dining table, her hands folded neatly, her eyes tracing the grain of the wood. To the world, her marriage was picture perfect. A charming husband, dinner parties with friends, a life polished to a shine. But beneath the surface, cracks had begun to spiderweb through her world, invisible to anyone but her. She was a woman of quiet power, the CEO of a luxury resort chain, a titan in the hospitality industry. Yet in her own home, she was diminished. Her husband, Tyler, a man with a quick smile and an easy charm, had a habit of brushing off her achievements. When friends asked about her work, he'd interrupt with a laugh. "Oh, she dabbles in some business stuff, keeps herself busy." His words stung, but she swallowed them, convincing herself it was just his way, that love meant letting him shine. She told herself they were a team, even when it felt like she was playing a supporting role in his story. Tyler's family was worse. His mother, Barbara, had a smile that never reached her eyes, a politeness that felt like a wall. At family dinners, she'd comment on the woman's braided hairstyle. "So intricate, must take hours. Don't you ever want something simpler?" The words were cloaked in curiosity, but they carried a barb, a subtle jab at her blackness. Barbara's son, Chase, Tyler's younger brother, was less restrained. He'd smirk, eyeing her vibrant dresses. "Bold choice, but maybe tone it down next time? You stand out too much." The table would chuckle, and Tyler would join in, his laughter a silent agreement that cut deeper than the insult itself. She endured these microaggressions, the small slights that piled up like stones. Family barbecues and birthday parties came and went, but invitations often slipped Barbara's mind. When the woman asked Tyler why she was left out, he shrugged, his voice casual. "You know how Mom is. She forgets. Don't make it a big deal." But it was a big deal. Each exclusion was a reminder that, to them, she was an outsider. Her presence was tolerated but never truly embraced. Still, she stayed quiet, believing patience would earn her a place in their world. She told herself Tyler's silence was peacekeeping, not betrayal. She told herself she was happy, but the cracks grew. She noticed how Tyler never corrected his family's assumptions about her. When Chase called her the safe choice at a holiday gathering, implying Tyler could have aimed higher, her husband laughed it off, changing the subject. When Barbara mused about her surprisingly polished accent, as if her upbringing in a modest but proud community was something to overcome, Tyler said nothing. The woman's heart ached, but she buried it, clinging to the idea that love meant sacrifice, that her silence was strength. Then came the evening that shattered the illusion. They sat in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the quiet. Tyler scrolled through his phone, his face lit by the screen's glow, while she sipped chamomile tea, its warmth a small comfort. Almost as an afterthought, he spoke, his tone too casual, too rehearsed. "By the way, Chase and Amanda set a date for their wedding. It's at some fancy resort in the mountains. Family only, though. They want to keep it simple, no drama, so you're not invited." The words hit like a slap. Her fingers tightened around the mug, the heat burning her palms, but she didn't flinch. Not invited to her husband's brother's wedding, to a celebration at a resort she owned, a crown jewel in her empire, built with her vision and grit. Tyler didn't know that part. He never asked enough to know. To him, she was just his wife, someone who dabbled in business, not the mastermind behind a chain of luxury retreats. She'd kept her success under her maiden name, Jackson, savoring the privacy, believing he loved her for who she was, not what she owned. Now that choice felt like a trap. She searched his face for a trace of fight, a hint that he'd stood up for her. "So I'm not family?" she asked, her voice low, trembling with a mix of hurt and disbelief. Tyler shifted, avoiding her eyes. "It's not like that. Chase and Amanda are just particular. I didn't want to argue. It's just one weekend. You'll be fine." His dismissal was a blade, slicing through years of excuses she'd made for him. He wasn't defending her. He was choosing his family's comfort over her dignity, agreeing to erase her from a moment that should have included her. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. She stared at him, the man she'd vowed to build a life with, and saw a stranger. All the time she'd let slights slide, Barbara's backhanded compliments, Chase's smirks, Tyler's laughter, flashed through her mind. She'd been patient, supportive, silent. And for what? To be told she didn't belong, that her presence was drama to be avoided. Later that night, alone in her study, she opened her laptop. An email from her senior manager at the resort chain waited, addressed to Mrs. Jackson. It was a routine update about the wedding preparations at her flagship resort, the one Chase had chosen for his big day. The manager's words were respectful, a reminder of who she was, not just a wife, but a woman who'd built an empire. She replied swiftly, her fingers steady on the keys. "I'll be attending. Keep my presence discreet. No announcements." She closed the laptop, her reflection staring back from the dark screen. The hurt still burned, but something else flickered beneath it, a spark of resolve. She stood crossing to the window, the night sky stretching wide and endless. For years, she'd let Tyler's family define her place, let his silence chip away at her worth. No more. The resort they'd chosen to exclude her from was hers. Every chandelier, every marble floor, every detail crafted by her hands. They thought they could push her out, but she would walk into that wedding on her own terms. Not as a guest, but as the woman who owned the ground they stood on. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also woken her. She wasn't just Tyler's wife. She wasn't the outsider they dismissed. She was a force, and they were about to learn exactly who she was. She stood at the window, the night sky a vast canvas of stars, her reflection a silhouette of resolve. The resort they'd chosen to exclude her from was hers. Every chandelier, every marble floor, a testament to her strength. They thought they could erase her, but she would walk into that wedding as the woman who owned the ground they stood on. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also lit a fire. She wasn't just Tyler's wife, nor the outsider they dismissed. She was a force, and their rejection had awakened her. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains, but the warmth couldn't touch the cold weight in her chest. She sat at her desk, the wedding photo of her and Tyler staring back, a relic of a life she'd tried to believe in. Her fingers hovered over the frame, then pushed it face down. Enough. She opened her laptop, drafting a single email to her lawyer. "Prepare the divorce papers." The words felt like a release, each keystroke loosening the chains of a marriage that had suffocated her worth. She didn't tell Tyler. There was no need. He'd chosen his family's comfort over her dignity, and she was done waiting for him to see her. She packed a small suitcase, her movements deliberate, each item a step toward reclaiming herself. The resort, her empire's crown jewel, was waiting. She'd go there, not to confront, but to stand in her truth. As she zipped the bag, her phone buzzed. An email from Lisa, her senior manager, a black woman whose loyalty had been a quiet anchor for years. "Mrs. Jackson, everything's set for the wedding. Your suite is ready, discreet as requested." The name Mrs. Jackson sparked a flicker of pride. It wasn't just her maiden name, it was the identity she'd built, the one Tyler never cared to know. The drive to the mountains was a blur of winding roads and snow-dusted peaks. When she arrived, the resort gleamed under the winter sun, its glass facade reflecting the strength she'd poured into it. Staff greeted her with nods of respect, their voices low but warm. "Welcome back, Mrs. Jackson." She smiled, instructing them to keep her presence quiet. She wasn't here to make a scene, not yet. She needed space to breathe, to heal. In her suite, she stood on the balcony, the air crisp and sharp. The mountains stretched before her, their silent majesty a mirror to the strength she was rediscovering. She pulled out a leather-bound journal, its pages worn from years of thoughts she'd kept private. Pen in hand, she wrote, "I let them dim my light for too long. No more. This place, this empire, is mine. I am mine." The words flowed, each one a step toward reclaiming the woman she'd buried under patience and sacrifice. The wind carried her resolve, whispering freedom across the snow. Lisa joined her later, her presence a steady comfort. They sat by the fireplace, its crackling warmth softening the room's edges. "You built this place from nothing," Lisa said, her voice firm. "Every brick, every guest, every award, it's yours. Don't let anyone, not Tyler, not his family, make you feel small." The words landed like a lifeline. Lisa had seen her through boardroom battles and late-night strategy sessions, had watched her navigate a world that often doubted a black woman's place at the top. "You're not just a CEO," Lisa continued, her eyes fierce. "You're a force. They don't get to define you." She nodded, her throat tight. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as Tyler's wife, but as herself. The firelight danced across the room, and she let Lisa's words sink in. She thought back to the early days, starting with one small hotel, defying skeptics who questioned her vision, her youth, her blackness. She'd faced investors who raised eyebrows at her braids, clients who assumed she was staff, not owner. Yet she'd built an empire, resort by resort, proving them wrong with every success. Tyler had never asked about that journey. He'd never cared to know the woman who'd fought for this. But standing here, in the heart of her creation, she felt the weight of that truth lifting. Her phone buzzed again, a notification from a staff member. "Rumors are circulating among the wedding party. They're saying you've been living off Tyler's money, that you're just a housewife with no ambition." The words stung, a fresh wound from a family determined to rewrite her story. She could imagine Chase's smirk, Barbara's raised brow, their whispers painting her as a leech. The staff, loyal to her, had caught wind of it, their message a quiet act of solidarity. She set the phone down, her jaw tight. They could spread their lies, but they couldn't touch the truth carved into every corner of this resort. She walked to the mirror, her reflection framed by the suite's elegant decor. The woman staring back wore a tailored blazer, her braids swept into an elegant updo, her eyes sharp with purpose. She thought of the years she'd spent softening herself for Tyler's family, choosing neutral tones to avoid Chase's comments, staying quiet to keep Barbara's peace. No more. She opened her closet, pulling out a deep emerald dress, its bold hue a defiance of their expectations. As she slipped it on, the fabric hugged her curves, a reminder of the vibrancy they'd tried to suppress. She wasn't hiding anymore. Back on the balcony, she leaned against the railing, the mountains a silent witness to her transformation. The pain of Tyler's betrayal still lingered, a bruise that would take time to fade, but it was no longer the loudest thing in her heart. She closed her eyes, letting the cold air fill her lungs. This was her healing, slow, deliberate, but undeniable. She wasn't here to beg for a place at their table. She was the one who'd built the table, the room, the world they stood in, and they'd learn that soon enough. She returned to her journal, writing one final line. "They thought they could break me, but they only showed me how strong I am." Closing the book, she stood, her shoulders squared. The wedding was days away, and she'd be there, not as the wife they dismissed, but as the woman who owned the ground beneath their feet. She made a silent vow. Never again would she let anyone define her worth. The resort hummed around her, its elegance a reflection of her resilience. She was ready to step into her power, to let the world see the woman she'd always been. The resort hummed with quiet elegance, its grandeur a reflection of her resilience. She closed her journal, the final line. "They thought they could break me, but they only showed me how strong I am," a vow etched into her soul. She stood, shoulders squared, ready to face the wedding, not as the wife they dismissed, but as the woman who owned the ground beneath their feet. Never again would she let anyone define her worth. And as she stepped into the new day, the mountain air carried a promise. She was enough, and her story was just beginning. The resort's lobby sparkled with morning light, guests bustling toward breakfast, their laughter mingling with the clink of coffee cups. She descended the grand staircase, her emerald dress catching the sun, its bold hue a quiet rebellion against the years she'd dimmed herself. As she crossed the marble floor, a soft thud broke her stride, a silk scarf slipping from her bag. Before she could bend to retrieve it, a man knelt swiftly, picking it up with care. "This your?" he asked, his voice warm, his eyes kind. He was tall, with a thoughtful gaze and hands calloused from work, not wealth. She nodded, offering a small smile. "Thank you. I'm clumsy today." He grinned, handing it back. "Hardly. You look like someone who's got everything under control." His name was Eric, an architect staying at the resort for a design conference. Over the next few days, their paths crossed in small, unforced moments. He'd catch her reading in the lounge, a worn copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God in her hands, and ask about her favorite passages. "You light up when you talk about books," he said one afternoon, leaning against a pillar, his sincerity disarming. "It's like you're telling your own story through them." She laughed, surprised by how easily she opened up. He didn't pry, didn't assume, just listened, his attention a gift she hadn't realized she'd been craving. Their conversations grew, unfolding naturally over walks through the resort's snow-dusted gardens. Eric shared stories of his work, designing homes that told the stories of their owners. "Every building has a soul," he said, pausing by a frozen fountain. "I try to make spaces that feel like home, not just structures." She felt a pang, thinking of the home she'd shared with Tyler, a place that never truly felt hers. Eric noticed her quiet moment, gently shifting the topic. "What's your favorite thing about this place?" he asked, gesturing to the resort. She hesitated, tempted to reveal her ownership, but instead said, "It feels like a sanctuary, a place where you can be yourself." He nodded, his eyes holding hers. "I see that in you. You're real. Not many people are." His gestures were small but deliberate. A cup of tea left at her table when she seemed lost in thought, a compliment on her bold earrings that carried no judgment. Once, as they passed a group of guests, one whispered about her vibrant coat. "She's so loud with her style." Eric overheard, his brow furrowing, but he turned to her with a grin. "That coat's a statement. Wear it like you mean it." His words, simple but affirming, felt like a shield against the world's scrutiny. For the first time in years, she felt seen not for what she represented, but for who she was. Their connection deepened over quiet moments. A shared laugh over a spilled coffee, a debate about jazz versus blues under the starlit patio. Eric didn't ask about her wealth or status, didn't care about the trappings others fixated on. When she spoke of her love for bold colors, he listened without a trace of the condescension she'd endured from Tyler's family. "You remind me of my mom," he said one evening, his voice soft. "She wore bright scarves, said they were her armor. You've got that same fire." The comparison warmed her, a reminder of her own strength, rooted in a heritage she'd once muted to fit in. But the resort wasn't just her sanctuary. It was a stage where whispers traveled. One morning, as she and Eric sat in the lounge, a guest approached, a friend of Tyler's family. Her smile was tight, her words laced with venom. "I heard you've been living off your husband's money," she said, loud enough for others to turn. "Funny seeing you here acting like you belong." The accusation stung, echoing the rumors Chase and Barbara had spread. Eric's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking to her, searching for a cue. She met his gaze, her voice steady. "If you want to know who I am, look at how I carry myself, not what others say." The guest faltered, retreating under her calm resolve. Later, alone with Eric by the fireplace, the rumor lingered between them. He hesitated, his usual ease replaced by a quiet tension. "I overheard more of that talk," he admitted, his voice low. "People saying you're just a housewife, that you don't have a career. Is that true?" His question wasn't cruel, but it carried a flicker of doubt, a crack in the trust they'd built. Her heart sank, the old wounds of being underestimated reopening. She could have explained, could have revealed she owned the resort, but she didn't. Eric, she said, her voice firm but not cold, if you want to know me, watch how I live, not what they whisper. The truth speaks for itself. She stood, leaving the words to settle, her dignity intact. Eric didn't follow her immediately. She spent the afternoon alone, walking the resort's quiet trails, the snow crunching under her boots. She wondered if she'd misjudged him, if even he would reduce her to the lies others told. But as dusk fell, he found her in the garden, his breath visible in the cold air. I asked around, he said, his voice steady. The staff, they respect you, not just as a guest, but as someone who built this place. I don't care about the money or the title. I care about you. His words were an apology, but more than that, they were a promise. He'd sought the truth, not to judge her, but to understand her. I was wrong to doubt you, he added, his hand brushing hers. You're more than anyone's rumors. She looked at him, the weight of his sincerity settling over her. For the first time, she felt a spark of something new. Not just attraction, but hope. Eric saw her, not as a symbol or a stereotype, but as a woman with dreams, flaws, and fire. They walked back to the resort, their steps in sync, the silence between them comfortable. By the fire-lit lounge, they sat close, her hand resting near his. Tell me something real about you, she said, her voice soft. He smiled, recounting a childhood memory of building a treehouse with his dad, his voice full of warmth. She listened, her heart opening, the possibility of love stirring like a quiet melody. As the wedding drew closer, the resort buzzed with preparations, but she felt a new calm. Eric's presence wasn't a cure for the pain Tyler's family had inflicted, but it was a reminder that she deserved more than their dismissal. Their laughter by the fire, their shared glances, felt like the start of something honest. She wasn't ready to tell him everything. Not yet, but she didn't need to. He saw her, and that was enough. The rumors still floated, but they no longer defined her. She was stepping into a future where her worth wasn't up for debate, where love could be a partnership, not a battle. And as she looked at Eric, his smile steady and true, she knew she was ready to embrace that possibility. As she looked at Eric, his smile steady and true, she knew she was ready to embrace the possibility of a love that saw her fully, a love that didn't demand she shrink herself. The resort's fire-lit lounge glowed around them, a quiet promise of new beginnings. She was no longer defined by the rumors or the family that had tried to erase her. She was stepping into a future where her worth was her own to claim, and with Eric's hand brushing hers, she felt the first notes of a melody she hadn't dared to dream. The wedding day dawned, the resort a flurry of white roses and satin ribbons, guests in tailored suits and shimmering dresses filling the grand hall. She stood on her suite's balcony, the mountains a steadfast backdrop to her calm resolve. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, voicemails from Tyler, his voice a mix of desperation and defiance. Please, call me back, he pleaded in one. You're making a mistake, he snapped in another. She deleted them without listening further. His words were noise, not truth. She'd given him years to see her. He'd chosen blindness. Downstairs, the staff moved with precision, their loyalty to her unspoken but evident in every glance. One of them, a young concierge, approached discreetly. Mrs. Jackson, a guest mentioned you to the wedding party. They know you're here and who you are. The news had slipped, likely through a careless word from a vendor or a staff member's pride. Tyler's family now knew she owned the resort, the very place they'd chosen to exclude her from. She nodded, her expression unreadable. Let them know, I'm not hiding anymore. She chose a crimson gown for the day, its vibrant hue a declaration of her presence. As she descended the staircase, heads turned, not with whispers of judgment, but with awe. The staff greeted her with subtle nods, their respect a quiet armor. In the lobby, she spotted Tyler, his face pale, eyes darting as if searching for an escape. He'd heard the truth, and it had unraveled him. He approached, his steps hesitant, his voice low. Is it true? You own this place? She met his gaze, unflinching. It's always been true. You just never cared to ask. His eyes widened, a mix of shock and shame. I didn't know, he stammered. I thought, I thought you were just... He trailed off, unable to finish. She didn't fill the silence. He'd spent years reducing her to just a wife, dismissing her empire as a hobby. Now the weight of his ignorance crushed him. He reached for her hand, but she stepped back, her voice steady. You had your chance to know me. You chose your family's lies instead. Tyler's desperation grew, his calls incessant through the morning. He left voicemails begging for a meeting, then showed up at her suite, his face drawn with panic. I messed up, he said, his voice cracking. I should have stood up for you. I'll fix this. Just give me a chance. She looked at him, the man she'd once loved, and felt only clarity. You didn't mess up, Tyler. You made a choice, and I've made mine. She closed the door, the click final, like the shutting of a chapter. As the ceremony approached, she walked the resort's grounds, Eric at her side. The sun dipped low, casting golden light over the snow, and he took her hand, his touch grounding. You're glowing today, he said, his voice soft but sure. Not just the dress, something deeper. She smiled, the warmth of his words wrapping around her like a shawl. They paused by a frozen lake, the world quiet except for their breaths. I've spent so long fighting to be seen, she said, her voice low. With you, I don't have to fight. He squeezed her hand, his eyes steady. You never will. The contrast was stark. While Tyler's calls grew frantic, Eric's presence was a calm anchor. They shared a quiet moment in the resort's library, flipping through an old book of poetry, his laughter easy as she read a line aloud. His hand rested near hers, a silent promise of partnership. She thought of the years she'd spent shrinking for Tyler, dulling her vibrancy to fit his family's mold. With Eric, she was free to be bold, to be herself. The sunset painted the sky in hues of amber and rose, and as they walked back, she felt lighter, her heart opening to a future unburdened by betrayal. The wedding reception filled the grand hall, chandeliers casting a warm glow over laughing guests. She entered alone, her crimson gown a beacon, every step deliberate. Whispers followed, some of awe, others of unease. But she held her head high. Tyler stood across the room, his face ashen, his mother Barbara clutching her pearls, her composure fraying. Chase, the groom, avoided her gaze, his usual smirk gone. Then Tyler approached, his voice a harsh whisper. Don't do this. Don't ruin everything. Let's talk later, privately. His plea was desperate, but it carried the same self-preservation she'd come to know. She faced him, her voice low but cutting. The words she'd held back for years finally free. The woman you betrayed begged for your love, Tyler. She dimmed herself to fit your world, hoping you'd see her. The woman standing here today doesn't need your apologies. The room stilled, guests turning, their murmurs fading. Tyler's face crumpled, his hands shaking. I didn't mean, he started, but she raised a hand, silencing him. You meant every choice you made. You let your family call me nothing, and you agreed. This isn't my ruin. It's yours. Eric appeared at her side, his presence steady, not possessive. He didn't speak, but his hand brushed hers, a quiet support. Barbara stepped forward, her voice trembling with forced calm. This is a family event. You're causing a scene. She met Barbara's eyes, unflinching. This is my resort, my home. You don't get to decide where I belong. The truth landed like a stone, rippling through the crowd. Tyler's shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow, the weight of his regret a shadow he couldn't escape. She turned, her gaze finding Eric's, his nod a silent encouragement. She didn't need to stay longer. The hall, the guests, the family, they were no longer her battle. She walked toward the exit, Eric beside her, their hands entwined. The mountains loomed outside, their peaks sharp against the twilight, a testament to her unyielding strength. Tyler stood frozen, a lone figure in the crowd, his regret a weight he'd carry alone. She didn't look back. The doors closed behind her, the night air cool and freeing, her steps light with the certainty of her worth. She was no longer the woman they'd tried to erase. She was the woman who'd rewritten her story, and she was walking into it with a man who saw her as she was. Her journey proves betrayal doesn't define you. How you rise and embrace your worth does. They tried to box her in by her skin, her roots, or as Tyler's wife. But she rewrote her story, becoming a beacon of strength and freedom. She didn't just find new love. She found herself, a proud Black woman who needs no one's validation. What do you think? Should she have forgiven Tyler? Or was walking away her true victory? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if her story moved you, pass it on to inspire others. Thank you for joining us on this powerful ride. Your support means the world. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next story, where more voices rise and truths unfold. Until then, keep shining.